Hello. All right. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll let a few more people log in and then we'll get started. Hope everyone is having a great day. Excited to talk to Irina, learn about Romanian food and culture. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here today for a virtual author talk, the kind of thing we would normally love to do in the shop at Book Larder. I'm Lara Hamilton, and we are delighted to talk with Irina Georgescu today about her brand new, very first cookbook, CARPATHIA, about Romanian cuisine. I hope that you are thinking of questions that you want to ask. If you could, please use the little QA button at the bottom of your screen. And that will be the easiest way for me to see the questions. If you can't identify that button or it's not working, you can use the chat and I'll do my best to keep up with those questions there. And you will also have access to this afterwards. After about a day or so, I will send an email and you will be able to watch this again online. So I'm going to ask Irina to join us now. And
hello.
Yes, hello. Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. So you are wearing, just to start, the most beautiful blouse today. And I saw on Instagram this morning that it is a very special day for wearing a blouse like that. Tell us a little bit about it.
It's the International Day of Romanian Blouse, and it's called IE. And it's, you know, a shirt. It's beautifully embroidered, you can see, and the different patterns and colors. And usually there are 3 colors, like red, black, and white. But depending on different regions, you kind of have blue, and you have green and orange and yellow and deep brown. So it's really, it's very diverse, and it's really, you know, speaks of the richness of our culture. And it's you know, I'm very proud to have it and to wear it today. Is very, very special, and to have this interview with you.
Yeah, no, I'm so delighted we were able to do this. I mean, your book is absolutely lovely. I think I've, you know, gushed about it at you over Instagram for a couple months now. And so I'm really delighted that we have the chance to talk with you. And, you know, if anything, this sort of odd situation that we're in right now is opening up opportunities for us to talk with authors that we might not have otherwise gotten to talk to. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. You would never guess from looking at the beautiful light on your face that it is, you know, 8 o'clock where you are, and, and early evening, basically. So how are you doing in all of this? I've just, you know, been asking pretty much everyone that as we get started with these, because we're in such an unusual period right now. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you. I live in Wales. So it's, you know, I'm basically in the middle of nowhere in a good way. So I'm enjoying kind of talking about Romanian cuisine online, and, you know, promoting the book. I also, you know, still cook Romanian dishes and test them, and so it's pretty good. I was a bit worried at the beginning because my book was launched in the UK on the 17th of March, so it was just before the lockdown, and I thought, oh, you know, this is bad luck, because I worked towards it like for the last 3-4 years, and I was really kind of happy to say, yeah, I have it, you know. And it wasn't really a moment to celebrate because everyone was going through very difficult times, and I really found it hard to actually jump and say, everyone, I'm so happy today. You know, it was kind of a bit of a shock. But, you know, this is it. I had to deal with it. It wasn't that
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, good. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your background. So, how did you get into food and cooking?
Oh, I think it started with my mom, and being with her and helping her in the kitchen in Romania and Bucharest. We lived in a tiny apartment, so we didn't have a garden or anything like this. So I think for me it started there, but I didn't really think at that time, I'm going to learn to cook or anything. It was just part of everyday life to help mom. My sister was helping as well, and my dad. So, because it was really kind of making sure the family has food, because I grew up during communist regime and it wasn't really always abundant, or almost never, So we had to, help mom to make sure we had the right preserves all the time, and the right food and everything. So just by being with her and going with her to the market and shopping, in a way, this gave me the right skills in life, to be organized, to negotiate.
Uh-huh.
These peppers are too expensive.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and too skinny. And then bit by bit, I kind of, sometimes I help her to cook a certain dish. I think that in the book at some point I say about making mayo, because we didn't have any kind of electric whisk or anything like that. So everything was made by hand. So obviously making mayo is time consuming. You whisk and whisk and whisk. Or tarama salata, the cod's roe salad. Again, you whisk a lot and you pour oil bit by bit. And so for her, I think it was time consuming. So she always asked me, come and whisk here a little bit. So I was
Yeah.
in charge of the salad, of making mayo, making tarama, you see. So, which is really good, because sometimes even now I make it by hand, because especially when the quantities are quite small, because you kind of get the feel of when it's ready and when it's the perfect consistency. So this is how it started. And then after so many years, I moved to the UK, and all of a sudden I realized that I took Romanian dishes and my family recipes and my family dishes, I took them for granted. And there was nobody around me to actually tell me how to make a certain dish. And Cooking Romanian actually connected me to my family back home. And I know there is Skype, very often when my mom was alive, I was able to say, hey, mom, can you have a look at this? I failed. So are the meat okay? The little sausages we have. So yes, Skype helped, but not at a certain level, the soul level, So Cooking Romanian and being able to share it with my kind of new family here in the UK was really special.
Yeah.
So this is how we kept going,
Yeah. Yeah. And then you decided to write a book.
Yes, it wasn't that easy.
Yeah.
It wasn't that easy. I think by, first of all, Cooking Romanian, then and looking at what people were asking, not just like about the recipe, but about the background of a certain recipe. And for so many people, sometimes they were saying, oh, I had this in Turkey, or I had this in Greece, or I had this type of dumplings in Germany, and I kind of started to look at the history and bit by bit rediscover a history that I didn't study at school. And the history connected to food. And I found it fascinating to discover a country's history like that through dishes. So I realized that there was interest for Romanian cuisine and for Romanian history and the story of the landscape as well. So I looked around at some point. I built my website. Then I started social media. And people were interested. So I looked around, I did a bit of research, and I realized that there was no Romanian cookery book at the standard we have cookery books today. So they were Romanian books, but without photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And very, I wouldn't say academic necessarily, but really kind of heavy on history and I mean, very, very good for studying a whole culture. But I wanted something that had a very like easy format, light, that you can just take with you in the kitchen, and with the main recipes that we cook today in Romania. So if you go to visit Romania and you go to a Romanian restaurant, then you will find the dishes that are in this book. So
Mm-hmm.
it's no gap. There is no gap. I try to keep as close as possible to how we cook in Romania today.
Mm-hmm.
So a tourist, if you go and visit Romania, then you will be able to know from the menu what is butter beans with smoked ham hock or something like that,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you in the book. So it's a nice connection. I wanted to make it contemporary, not modern, but what you will find if you travel today to Romania.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that was surprising for me, I mean, Eastern European cookbooks, have sort of they've had a bit of a renaissance in the past couple of years. And I was really surprised when I first started to look through the book that Romanian cuisine is really its own thing, but has so many different influences. How would you describe Romanian cuisine?
Well, yes, it's a mosaic of everything that actually came together on our territory. Why on what is today Romania, basically, because it's a young country in a way. The thing is with the book that I try to make it more like a guide, more like a journey of discovery for people, exactly like you said that happened to you. And I think that when you discover Romanian cuisine, then you will also discover the fact that it was shaped by its landscape. And that means by the Carpathian Mountains. And this is why it's called Carpathia. Because we have three main regions in Romania. To the east of the Carpathian Mountains, we have Moldova. To the south, we have what was called Wallachia. And in the center and the west, we have Transylvania. Obviously, we have other regions like Banat or Dobroja, but the main regions are these three regions on either side of the Carpathian Mountains. But also, the Carpathian Mountains shaped our history. So to the south of the Carpathian Mountains, we had the Ottoman Empire. And to the north of the Carpathian, if you cross the mountains, you had the Habsburg Empire, which was later Austro-Hungarian. And obviously to the east, we had a strong Slavic influence. But the Russian power was developing in the 18th, 19th century. So they all three, in a way, clashed or negotiated some land on the Romanian territory. But you can see how the cuisine can be so diverse, and the peasant cookery basically to be so diverse, because we have the Greek and the Turkish influences in the south and the Serbian influences as well. We have, the Russian influences in the east and the German, Hungarian influences in the center. But at the same time, we influence their cuisine as well. So it's just not one-way road in this story. And you can see from the dishes, that the starters are really much the Greek way, the meze, the little plates that you can mix, and you make a huge plate for yourself as a starter. And then the main courses, obviously, they rely on pork, but, we love chicken and beef and lamb only for Easter, for instance. We only eat lamb for Easter. But then because we have the Danube Delta, and because the mountains have so many rivers, we love fish, freshwater fish. So obviously all of a sudden we have a cuisine that's really balanced between meat and fish. So we welcome both meat sources. And also, it's also the landscape, a very good combination between plain, hills, and mountains.
Here, I'm gonna
So
hold this
that
up
means,
because I couldn't
oh,
really get
yes,
a photo. I mean, it looks like something out of The Sound of Music almost. You know, like, and I wouldn't have. I mean,
it is.
I had no idea. So yeah,
That's
beautiful.
Dracula's castle. What you have there is
Oh,
drowned.
there we go. Okay, so maybe not The Sound of Music then. Another
Yes,
movie, but okay.
yes. So you can see the variety. So that variety of the landscape also, you know, influence the ingredients in our cookery. So we love fruit, we love you know, vegetables. So it's not just about pork and potatoes
Yeah.
and sauerkraut.
So you mentioned the meze. Give us a sense of like, so if you sit down for a meal in Romania, what's the overall experience like?
Oh, hopefully good. You'll be served a shot of Zuika first, I think. And that is a plum brandy, very strong. It's similar to grappa, to the Italian grappa, but it's actually drunk at the beginning of the meal rather than at the end, like the grappa. But it's really, really strong. So that will definitely put you in the mood for a lot of food. So on the table, you will actually have, you know, I'm looking through the book now because I want to show you, you know, you will have some charcuterie, for instance, from here. And you will have definitely some, you know, the aubergine dip and roast the chargrilled peppers with
Right.
garlic vinaigrette. So those will be on the table as well. You will have definitely the butterbean dip with caramelized onions. It's called fasole battuta. And this red one here is a zakuska. It has a Russian name because it's served at the beginning of the meal with some vodka, basically. So in Russia, zakuski are like little starters that you eat with when you drink vodka.
Right.
But for us, it's just this dip. So you will have that on the table. You will definitely have some lardo, like this, very thin slices, delicious on toast. It's absolutely a dream. And you will have some fish salad, like the mackerel salad here.
Oh yeah.
Nice with tarragon or with dill. Very, very good. And obviously you will have some polenta. So polenta is on the table, and we eat polenta for breakfast, we eat polenta as a starter, we eat polenta as a side dish, and even as a dessert. So polenta is really, really important in our cuisine. So these are the dishes, and you know, you have some. This is a grilled cheese.
Yeah.
Breaded, so you dip it in egg and in breadcrumbs, and then you fry it very quickly, and it's just a dream. It's amazing. So you can't stop eating it. That's the problem.
No, that looked incredible. And I love that you offered, I think that's a traditional Romanian cheese, but you offered cheddar as an alternative because that cheese is hard to find. And I thought, I definitely have cheddar in my fridge. So I may be making
that is something that I wanted in the book. I mean, at the beginning of each chapter, I talk about traditional ingredients. But then when I cook with those, when I cook the recipe, I can't really use traditional ingredients because you won't be able to find them. Right. In the UK, you can find them in Polish delis. But even there, you sometimes can't find the same Romanian variety. So it's very complicated. And I wanted people to actually be encouraged to cook Romanian. Because if you don't cook Romanian, you won't be able to taste how delicious this cuisine is. So I wanted to make it really, really easy. So cheddar, although some people would say that, well, is it authentic, your recipe, if you use cheddar? I think it is, but I tried to find a good substitute.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you, as a writer, how do you sort of walk that line between authentic and sort of accessible for your audience? And also just sort of put your own flair on it. I noticed you had, I think it was a poached ox tongue recipe
Yes.
that I think you said was normally a stew, but you had sort of put your own spin on it. Like, how do you walk that line as a writer?
Oh, it is complicated, and I found it really hard. This is my first book, so I never wrote a book before. So I just didn't necessarily know how to do that. I found that sometimes I had that conversation in my head, like, is this right for the dish to make this change? Is it still authentic if I replace the Romanian brinza with cheddar? What's the story behind the dish? What will a reader learn if they read the story? Because I wanted to say too many things at the same time about Romania in one book, so
Yeah.
I wanted to be some valuable information there. Then I was thinking sometimes that, I need to keep it really traditional, even if the method sometimes in some of the dishes is quite long. Not that necessarily you have to work all the time to cook a certain dish. It's a balance between how many stages you have in a dish and cooking times, because sometimes it's just something that you put in the oven and you leave it there for 2 hours or 3 hours, and that's fine. You don't do anything. There is no prepping. Yes. So I try to, to keep the right balance. And also, if you look at the book, I just didn't want everything to be a stew, which in Romania sometimes it is. Tocana, this is one of the, national dishes, which basically means a stew, and everything is a tocana. Everything can be a tocana. So the reason why, in a way, I changed the ox tongue recipe was that I didn't want to have another stew in the book, but also because in the UK, this is how I eat the dish, because it's very easy to make a sandwich actually with that, and put the ox tongue, and then you put the layers of the olives, salsa, and you make a sandwich. So it's ideal. So yes, I found it, in a way, fascinating. It's a learning curve, because then it's not just me writing the book, it's the whole team that is involved in the book. So you have the editor, you have from the publisher, you have your agent, then you have your photographer. So at every stage, everyone involved has his own expertise. And I couldn't just go in and say, no, everyone is wrong. I'll do it my way. Yes, but it was fascinating to work together to incorporate all the changes and all the views on the Romanian cookery. So
yeah, and I do just want to remind our listeners, you can use the Q&A feature to ask questions as well. Don't let me ask all of them. There were a few sort of key ingredients that really fascinated me, and one is
yes,
borscht. Borscht.
Borscht.
Tell us about borscht, which seems, by the way, like an all-purpose sort of sort of ingredient, because you could even like use the remains as a face mask. So I'm, like, right? So if you want to use every bit of your cooking, it looked like a good one to do. Tell us about it.
Also, you can drink it in the morning on empty stomach, and it's really, really good. So basically, borscht is a fermented liquid, fermented kind of drink. And you ferment wheat with cornmeal, and you put some bread, and you put some, lavage if you want, or parsley or dill, whatever you have. Or you don't put any of this, you just put the wheat and that's it. So it can be very, very simple. And you ferment it for a few days or 2 weeks, depending on the climate. I mean, back home in the summer in Romania, probably it would have been ready in a few days. Here in Wales, in the UK, it takes 2 weeks sometimes to do that. So, and at the end of it, at the end of the fermentation process, you just strain the liquid, and you use it in soups, well, in broth, when you make it can be chicken, it can be pork, it can be vegetable, anything that uses the liquid at the end of the cooking time of the dish to give that little tanginess and sourness and also sweetness, because it's not aggressively tangy. So it's very nice to add it at the end. Then you have all the goodness of the probiotics and everything that develops there during the fermentation process, and you use it in a broth, and that broth will be called borscht. So there is this kind of a bit confusing. How do you make this difference between a borscht, like the ingredient, and the borscht that's actually a whole dish? And obviously you can use, instead of borscht, if you don't want to make that, you can use vinegar, or you can use really tangy tomatoes, or you can use some fruit that is not ready yet, so it's like green, fresh. So you can use anything that gives a little sourness. But also you can use sour cream mixed with the egg yolk, and you can add it at the end in a broth, but it needs to be tempered. So you need to take a bit of the hot broth to put it in the sour cream with the egg, to bring the temperatures to be kind of at the same temperature.
Right.
And then you put the sour cream. Yeah, because otherwise it splits and it doesn't look great, but it tastes good. So don't panic if this happens to you. You don't have to put it in the bin. It just doesn't look good, but close your eyes. Yeah, so this is borscht. So we use it, but you can also use it in stews. So if you want something that's really tangy, you can put borscht in a stew. So if you cook with cabbage, but it's not fermented cabbage like sauerkraut, but you want a little bit of tanginess, you can put borscht in it. That's not the problem. And sometimes we bake bread with borscht. So instead of yeast, so it's it's really good. And obviously, like you said, like I said, like also in the book, you can drink it, and you can use the wheat with the cornmeal and put it on your face and rub it a little bit like that, and stay like this for 5 minutes and then wash it. And it's just very, very good for the skin.
Amazing. It sounds like a good lockdown project, right?
Yes.
I drink it, it's in my soup, and it makes me glow every day. I love it. One of the other sort of traditional dishes that I thought looked incredible was this.
Oh, yes. Kolak. Kolak, yes.
Kolak. Tell us about kolak.
Well, kolak is bread, basically. And everything that is round can be a kolak.
Okay.
But obviously is braided. So you kind of work in like 3, 5, 6, 7, depending, there's just sky's the limit with that. And it's really like very skillful. And kolak is used at church on a Sunday, for instance, to take it to church to be blessed by the priest, and then you take it home and eat it or share it with family or friends. Kolak is part of other religious celebrations, like saint days, or Lent, or everything that you want to celebrate with bread, which is kind of highly significant and symbolizes wheat and richness and wealth as well. So it's this connection of making bread and eating bread, which is very religious. So everything that you want to celebrate in church, it includes a kolak. And obviously when you get married, that includes a kolak. And sometimes we break this kolak over the head of the bride, and we count the crumbs, and that many kids she will have, how many crumbs the bread had. So wow. That's scary because you can end up with 100.
Is she saying, please don't make my bread too dry?
Yeah. Or just break it in one instead of kind of doing this.
Yeah, exactly. I would like a very, very moist bread, please. Please put lots of eggs in mine.
Yes. Oh, yes, and that is a very good point. I mean, it can be only flour, yeast, salt, and water, or you can make it with eggs, and you can put milk, and you can make it very like rich bread, and it's very special. But kolak can be little like that, or can be huge. You can't see big.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Well,
So
the photo in your book was absolutely gorgeous, and I think
it's very easy to make. I know it looks a bit
it looks very not easy to make.
It is because actually I use the braiding in 5, so it's very easy to bring everything to the middle basically.
Okay.
And then just twist one and put it around it. So, and this is how you bake it.
Okay.
And some people baked it and tag me in their photos on Instagram. So if you go on Instagram and look at the highlights, I saved in highlights everything that people cooked or baked from Carpathia.
Oh, cool.
And it's just beautiful to see this kolak made by people. It's so nice.
All right. We have a question from Cecily who wants to know if there's a Romanian equivalent to the drink kombucha.
Well, this can be Borscht. It's just that kombucha is tea, correct?
Yeah.
So this is definitely the one. It won't be as sweet, probably. You don't put any sugar in it or anything, and you don't mix it with anything else. So it's not that sweet, but it's really refreshing. And on a summer's day when it's really hot, you need that tanginess and saltiness of the drink to restore you, to make you feel less hot.
Yeah. You mentioned with the goulash, the sort of breaking the crumbs over the bride's head. And one of the things that really struck me as I read a lot of your recipe headers is there just seems to be so much, I don't know, almost like symbolism and ritual sort of wrapped up in some of the recipes. Like salt means, I can't remember, it was like in one place, it was like you served a bread with salt because that meant one thing. And so tell us about some of the, sort of the almost like the mythology, I guess, of some of the dishes and the way some of the ingredients are used, or some of the rituals that you have around some of the food.
Well, obviously it's there are superstitions all the time, related to food, and because especially in the countryside, people are really very religious. It's this intertwining between the religious and traditions and the food, because this is how you celebrate a tradition with food. So here we go. Food is part of a ritual all of a sudden. So obviously salt being a kind of rare ingredient represented wealth, if you had it. So it's very, and if you drop some salt on the table when you sprinkle something or cook, that means that you're going to have a fight with someone. So if you don't want that, just in case you don't want it, you need to quickly put some drops of water on it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Put out the fire, I guess, of the salt.
So that's it. Yes. So that's it. That is not going to happen. So it's the same with polenta, again, because it's so important in our cuisine, and we kind of try to tell our future, to guess our future in a polenta crust. So if it splits, it's like you're going to go on a long journey, for instance. But we do have this tradition of trying to tell the future. It's especially with coffee. At the end of the book, I have there are some images with a coffee cup turned the way we actually turn it at home to guess the shapes. So this is the...
Oh, right. Okay.
So you drink the coffee and then turn the cup like this, upside down, leave it to dry, and it will form different shapes. And some people are really good at, telling them, fortune telling, actually. This is the word I was looking for. Yes. Yeah. So it's everything, food is part of everyday life in more than just nourishing,
Mm-hmm.
it's fascinating. And also sometimes when you make bread and the fruit trees are really just at the beginning and in the summer, in the spring, and they're just blossoming, you take some raw dough and you stick it to the trees so they can be very fruitful in the autumn or in the summer, depending.
Uh-huh.
So yes, it's really, really nice to see how you cross this, the kind of the line between the season and nature and food and traditions.
Yeah.
I think it's a very nice place to be. It
Mhm.
feels kind of you're part of the nature and the universe rather than outside it or against it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's one of those other ways that you sort of feel connected to the past too, right? Because you figure those superstitions have been passed down for many, many, many generations, and I'm still pouring water on my salt, just like somebody did 500 years ago
Yes.
or whatever. Yeah. So
And then you say, oh, it's silly. Yes.
no, but oh, it's fun though. The bread thing is still, I don't know, the bread thing over someone's head is still really making me laugh. Um, so Adria has a question. Any funny stories as you develop these recipes, or are there any recipes that you're most proud of?
Oh, I'm proud of all of them, because basically um, I try to keep them in the traditional way. So I change only a little bit. So it's not necessarily a development work, because I didn't invent any of them, which is good. Uh, so I'm proud of all the recipes because they are part of the Romanian, culture and how we eat. Um, Funny stories, yes, probably. For instance, with the polenta dumplings, for some reason they sound really easy. They kind of say, "Oh, polenta dumplings." This I know. They are quite easy to make, and they are easy to make now. But I tested them like 25 times because all of the time I was thinking, it's not enough cornmeal. It's too much. Then it's too tough, the dumpling, and then you have to boil it for too long, and it's not feasible. How can you have a stew ready in 30 minutes and a dumpling ready in 55? This
Yeah.
doesn't work. Then it's too wet, then it's too dry. So I started to play with this just to kind of find the right consistency. And sometimes when I make it, and it's just I'm still not necessarily 100% happy with it, and I keep thinking, oh, I should have done this, and I should have added just a little bit more of that. So it's part of the fun in a way, because you enjoy. I ate a lot of dumplings because I hate to put things in the bin. So I ate them in any shape and form I had them. So yes.
So we have a couple more questions. One actually was kind of going back to the salt a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about that being expensive? Did that have anything to do with growing up under the communist regime, or is it sort of an earlier history that you're talking about?
Earlier history about the salt, yes, because it wasn't something that you could find like everywhere.
Yeah.
So obviously, like the spices, the salt had its own status. However, in Romania, we have salt mines,
Mm.
but I think it really didn't go to the peasantry. It was sold or kept as an expensive ingredient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily, during communist regime, we had salt.
Yeah. So, and then related to that, Leah would like to know how often you visit Romania now and how different is it than when you were growing up under communism?
I try to go twice a year, in the spring and in the autumn, and go to Bucharest where my family is and visit them, and then try to go to discover other regions, because even for me, I don't know everything about Romania, and it is different, in a good way if you think about the cities and how they developed, and the freedom you have and the abundance of produce you have. You know, the shops are exactly like the shops in the UK, for instance, or in the States. You have everything possible at any time. And even, you know, we can't say we don't have a certain ingredient, because we have it. You know, it's a part of the global, you know, food chain. And on the other hand, for me, when I work with traditional recipes and when I go to the countryside, I notice that the authenticity of places disappears bit by bit. The seasonality disappears as well, because obviously you can have strawberries in the supermarket in February, you know. I know you kind of love them in the summer when you have them in the garden, but actually you can have them in the winter, so it's fine. So bit by bit, that type of connection with the seasons disappears. And together with that, probably cooking methods as well, and preserving methods. Why would someone make a jam when they actually can have the real fruit in the shop? What is the purpose of a jam? Okay, you wanted to have something sweet, but preserving food when I grew up was very much about having something to eat or having nothing to eat. So in the winter, we ate sauerkraut, we ate the zakuska, you know, the pepper dip. We ate jams. That was our dessert, because sometimes we didn't get all the ingredients to make a cake. We didn't have the eggs, but we had the oil probably, or we didn't have any flour because it was rationed. So we had our jams and we had our compotes. The apple, the Queen's compote is just absolutely delicious. And for us, it meant food. But today, you'd make a preserve just probably because if you have a garden, you have too many like fruit there, you can make a jam. So I can see in Romania that some things in the countryside are really modern now. And in a way, for me, from the outside, going and visiting, it's a shame. But for them, it's progress, I think. You know,
Right.
and how do you marry this? What's the marriage between progress and authenticity? You know, you have a very beautiful, let's say, traditional house, and you see a double glazing all of a sudden. And I kind of go, why did you do that? Well,
Yeah.
because they are cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good and bad when I go back now and I look at Romania.
Yeah. One of the things that brings to mind for me is sort of that the marriage of tradition and something that feels very trendy right now, which is fermentation, which we've talked a little bit about with the Borscht. But I think a lot of people here in the US can think of it as this sort of big, laborious, you have to have lots of special equipment and starters and all these kinds of things. And one of the things that I think is very refreshing about your book and is that there's almost this much more casual approach to fermentation, that for a lot of things, all you really need is like a jar and some salt and you're good. So what are some of the things that, you know, if someone, maybe they're growing a garden for the first time, what are the things that you would encourage them to try fermenting?
Well, sauerkraut, first of all, because that's so easy. It's just cabbage and brine.
Yeah.
And obviously you can put some dill, or again, you can put lovage because we love that herb. But it's cabbage, and the recipe in the book is actually fermenting whole leaves of cabbage. So you can make sarmale, the stuffed cabbage leaves. But you can actually just grate the cabbage and put it in brine. But the original recipe for sauerkraut is only salt. So you don't even have to make the brine with water. And the actual brine is by the fermentation of the cabbage and the water from the cabbage combined with the salt. And that's very, very easy. And all you need to do is just to press the cabbage in the jar to create more juice and ferment with the salt. And that is really easy. And for those who grow tomatoes, and not all of them get to the stage where they are red, and they're a bit green or yellowish.
Uh-huh.
I think they can ferment tomatoes, and it's the same. You make the brine and you put the tomatoes in a jar and you wait, and you open the lid from time to time so it won't explode. So, but then you can actually smell when it's ready. It's a very pleasant, sour, sweet smell, and the tomatoes need to be firm. So if they're really soft and wrinkly, I don't think they are nice to eat. But they need to keep their shape, you know, even if inside they are kind of softish. So fermented tomatoes, but also with the tomatoes, if you don't want to ferment it with green ones, you make a jam. Make a jam with walnuts, and it's really, really delicious. So that is another, and again, jams are really easy to make, is to add sugar and fruit, you know, and the way I make it, they're really easy, and they can keep them for 6 months, and then it's fine. It's not a huge laborious project to make.
Yeah. You also had a recipe in the book for fermented tarragon, and said you could do that with sort of other, or I think it was tarragon that you used, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And which I just thought sounded really lovely, because I think, you know, a lot of people here will have herb gardens, and then, you know, there's like only so many dried herbs that you can use through the winter. So tell us more about that and sort of how you use them then in your cooking.
Well, there are two ways in a way. It's you whether just keep the herbs in salt in layers in a jar, but the green herbs will lose the fresh green color. So if you're ready to accept that, then it's fine. And then you just take them and use them in the food. They are not necessarily very salty because you just keep them in salt, so they won't ferment. And the other one is in vinegar. So you just preserve them in vinegar. And again, you just take a little bit out and you put it in stew, or in, you know, I don't think you can put it in a salad, but in something that is cooking, you can use them during the winter. And you can do that with a lot of herbs. And it's just with fermentation and this kind of preserving as well. So in vinegar, you preserve, you know, it's really a matter of trying. So I think that don't necessarily, obviously there is a ratio there, how much salt to how much water, or how much vinegar to how much water. But from there, just try to experiment. And you would learn. I mean, I learned in the same way, just by making and observing. And then I knew that the next time this is how I do it. And it's kind of very easy. And even if you think you failed, I don't think you did. So kind of try to learn from what you're doing, or by observing the stages of how things transform. So don't just do it. Yes.
Yeah. We had one more question. Dee Dee wanted to know, well, it's almost 9 o'clock there, so you're probably done cooking for today, but what did you cook today?
All right. Well, it's very hot here in Wales, if you can imagine. It only happens once a year or something like that. So I had fish, and I didn't put it on the grill. I could have put it on the barbecue, but I didn't. So I had fish with salad, tomatoes, and cucumber, and that's it basically. Yes, and I had some fennel. I have fennel in the garden, and it's very, very beautiful at the moment, very green. And I used fennel with the vinegar and the oil for the salad. So that was really kind of very light, because it's very hot, so you can't really eat grilled sausages, or maybe you can, but maybe I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah. So Irina, when you set out to, you know, sort of create this book about, I'll hold it up again, about Romania, what were the things that you really wanted people to sort of take away from?
Oh, plenty, loads. You know, my agenda with this book was full. I mean, it obviously the recipes, because I wanted them to be like the way we eat at home today. Then I wanted people to know about, first of all, the landscape of Romania. So the mountains, the plains, the Danube, delta, the rivers. So to understand the diversity of the landscape, because that has an impact on the cookery. Then that landscape had an impact on the history. So here we go. I started to talk about history as well, because if you take our food, and I think this is valid for most cuisines, if you take the food out of the context of the landscape and of the history, you don't understand it. You don't know why some people eat the way they eat. So I started to, I wanted people to understand a little bit about the history of Romania. Mm-hmm. Because we were very active, you know, in Europe in terms of our history. So I wanted that, and then I wanted to actually talk about Romania from a positive point of view. To talk about our UNESCO heritage. And we have so many, we have traditions and we have buildings that are listed by UNESCO, and you have the primeval forests of the Carpathian Mountains that are listed by UNESCO. So I wanted people to know how many we have, because we have quite a lot, and there are, I tried to put them all in the book.
Yeah.
Then we started to have artisan produce. So in terms of like charcuterie or cheese or jams, confitures, we have local producers who have their own brand now in a way. So I wanted, and these were recognized and are recognized, you know, they have protective geographical something, DOP or something, I don't know how it's called necessarily, but it's they are recognized by the EU that their provenance is in Romania. So it's a really kind of a very a collection of positive things about the country and about Romanians.
Yeah.
And while I was researching and when I wrote it, I kind of felt very, very proud. I'm not patriotic or anything, believe me, despite the blouse and everything.
No, but I think you should be. I mean, it's, you know, I was saying to you before we got on the call that you did such a beautiful job of sort of weaving together the food, the culture, the geography, the history, the superstitions, you know, sort of all those things. I mean, I really felt like after I read the book that I had a whole different understanding. I mean, not that I knew a lot to begin with, but I had a whole different understanding of the country, as well as, you know, some really great recipes that I want to try. So I thought it was great, especially right now when we can't go anywhere. I'm like, I feel like I kind of took a little trip right here with this book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I tried, you know, it was
Good.
hard to fit everything in
Oh yeah.
in
Oh, I'm sure.
242 pages.
Yeah. Was there anything that you wanted to make sure that we talked about today that we haven't talked about?
No, I think we talked, quite about a lot of things. No, it's just just to kind of encourage people to cook Romanian, just one dish maybe, and, you know, just connect with this culture somehow. We're not completely different from European cookery or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, that would be very nice if they can. But also on another like personal level, I think what I missed most when I wrote the book, when I was writing the book, was the fact that I didn't have mum with me to kind of ask her, how did you do that? How did you know? And I felt that at some point in my life, I should have had time to ask all these questions, or at least to kind of stay and talk to her or something. But I was busy being an adult and doing stuff. And I think that is nice if people go back to their families, you know, and kind of connect and try to cook an old recipe, or a recipe that only mom or grandmother makes in a certain way. So it would be really nice to keep a tradition alive through food.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful piece of advice for sure. Thank you so much for joining us today, and for, well, I guess you didn't have to stay up too late, but still, thank you for doing this in the evening where you are. Congratulations on the book, and I hope that you are able to get back to Romania sooner rather than later, because I know this is a tricky time for all of us when it comes to
Yes.
getting home. So I hope you're able.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, and thank you everyone for watching today. And the book, if you want to get a copy, is available at booklarder.com, and we're still doing free shipping. Yes, here we go. Carpe. Wonderful. All right, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Irina. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, you too. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.